Previously on Drone Wars.
The thing that I would say kind of blew it wide open is the war in Ukraine. People saw that was a national security imperative for us. I think that coupled with our departure from Afghanistan, which made it more politically palatable for people to get involved, those two things together really led to the explosion of people being interested in space.
If we want to maintain our place in the world, we have to look at things and try and solve big problems. If we want to help protect democracies around the world, we're going to need to do the same thing for them.
We are probably at a place now that we weren't 15 years ago, where autonomous systems, robotics can actually start replacing some of those very dangerous tasks, were once really the purview of the junior enlisted soldier in the military. The military made me who I am.
So let's shift gears for a minute here, right? Let's talk a little bit about government acquisitions. And I know this is like the biggest punching bag on every, sort of medium of communication. But what do you think needs to change?
I would say in general, both the government and now the industry that engages with the government has become really good at admiring the problem, complaining about the challenges that exist within the acquisition system. And so first and foremost, I would say to anyone that wants to build in government, in a technology area that the government needs or wants, you have to essentially play on the playing field as it exists. You have to play by the rules that exist today. If you're spending your time opining about what should change and how it should be different and what type of reform needs to happen, that's time that's taken away from actually putting your head down and hammering away at, solving the problems. So, that's probably like the top piece of it. But as far as reform goes and how do you actually change it, I think that clearly there's some misaligned incentives right now. Okay, we have government contracting officers who, we can complain all day that they're risk averse, but they're risk averse for a reason. They are following the regulations that are put in front of them. They're patriots. They want the military to be successful. They want us to have the best resources possible, but they have their own rules that they have to follow. Yeah. And, it would be very easy to say, well, there's, they don't move fast enough or it's too slow or they're too risk adverse. They're risk adverse by design. And so I think what it'll ultimately take is going to be a realignment of incentives, okay. Not necessarily even legislative reform, but how do we incentivize these folks to think like industry, to move like industry, and to work with industry better? And right now, I think that is that's a cultural change, which takes a long time.
I loved your idea we were talking about on the phone maybe a couple months ago, the 10 cents on every dollar idea. Share it with us.
But cool. If you, today, if you're in government acquisitions, you have to buy the best value that's technically commercially feasible, right? So the thing that's going to accomplish the mission at the lowest price. A lot of times that takes out of consideration what the end user actually wants. And so, if you made me, king for the day and I was in charge of federal acquisitions, the thing I would do instantly would be to change the incentive structure and say that we're actually going to go and get the thing that the end user wants. We're going to get it for the cheapest price. And your compensation is going to be based on how much you save the government getting that thing.
Here we go.
And so if you paid contracting officers like they were investment bankers, and some of them are getting comped out north of $1 million a year, who cares? That's budget dust to what they'd be saving the U.S. government.
Pennies on the dollar.
So, I think that it would also change the dynamic of who wants to be a contracting officer.
Sure.
You would have kids coming out of Harvard, out of top schools saying, I'm going to go work for the government as the government's business representative. And then I'm going to transition that experience into going and working somewhere else where I'm going to make a lot more money. Right. But it would change the game for sure.
Save them money, deliver the product that an end user wants. You can have very straight feedback on that as well to say it's a very clever idea.
If we can pay the football coaches at the military academies millions of dollars, I think we could price swing it for
There you go.
people who buy our weapon systems.
There you go.
I mean, not that 8-0 Army should be doing any cuts right now.
Yeah.
Keep that money flowing.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you, like, that is, that's actually kind of that's the example that works really well, right? Because you're already paying the coaches a ton of cash. There's precedent for it. So if you're president for a day, king for a day, that's how you tackle that problem. I like it. Tell me a little bit about, like, when you look at the current kind of landscape of autonomous systems, right? Where do you think we end up in 10 years?
You know, one complaint I've had about the way that we've been approaching bringing more autonomy into the fight is that, you know, we had this great example laid out for us in Ukraine of how these low-cost systems could really change the nature of warfare. And we tried to replicate that, and we are actively trying to replicate it by training operators to use FPV and some of these other things. And I think we almost missed the point here that they pursued that tool set because it was a survival moment. That's what they needed. But really, if you think about those systems, they are commodity items, right? The motors, the cameras, the radios, the speed control units in them. I mean, that's really what makes them work. And those are a race to the bottom on price. And so I think what I would like to see more of is taking the themes of those systems, the capabilities, the outcomes that we would like to see, and build towards those. Because I think we can make some really awesome things that exceed the capability of those very low-cost systems. But we can also make them at a low cost that, you know, frankly, we can absorb a moderately higher price on. Of course, it still has to be cheap. They have to be expendable. But I think that's where, you know, I would be building towards. I think the other aspect of it is that, you know, we haven't seen much innovation in how domestically we could create a more robust supply chain for some of those component level technologies.
Sure.
I think it's really hard. I think it's really hard to make a commercial case for doing it.
Yep.
But I'd like to see, you know, us at least try.
Give it a shot.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's switch gears for a second, right? If you were talking to Tommy 6 years ago when he started Decisive Point, what would you tell him?
I mean, I think I would. I mean, I have a whole host of lessons learned from like raising our first fund back then and all that. But there is a reality to this space that I think we learned pretty quickly, but is maybe one of the most important learnings that we have. And it's that this space, unlike any other industry I know of, has a customer that will tell you publicly in writing what their budget is every single year, what they're forecasting for next year, and the trend of what they've been spending for the past 30 years. And, you know, in that way, I mean, we spend a lot of time in the federal budget looking at appropriations, looking at the requests, looking at what offices in Congress are making those requests, trying to figure out what industries are important to them. Is that you can follow the money here. The other piece of it is, and we learned it a little later, is how important lobbying is.
Don't tell everyone my secret.
You know, like this goes back to playing the game as the rules are written today.
Yes.
I've heard lots of people say, well, I think we're too early for lobbying, or I think we can do it without it. The answer is you probably can. If you want to scale, if you want to get a long-term sticky contract, you have to have advocacy, you have to have appropriations. And so, you know, a lot of times when we're explaining it to young companies, we talk about that you need end user demand.
Yep.
Of course, it's really important.
First thing, end user demand.
But you then have to have someone who is going to hold the requirement or create the requirement.
Requirement builder.
You have to have a program that has both the budget and the mandate to solve the problem that requirement is addressing.
Program.
And then you have to have an authorizer in Congress and an appropriator in Congress that's going to put money on it. And so you can start a great company without having all those things in place, but you better have a plan to fill some of those holes. Absolutely. If you don't have them.
Drone Wars is recorded from Firestorm's global HQ in San Diego. From our custom-built studio inside one of our hero products, a modular industrial-grade manufacturing facility designed to be deployed anywhere in the world within 24 hours for on-demand drone production. Each week on the podcast, we bring you cutting-edge insights from top industry leaders, sharing the breakthroughs and technologies they're working on, the hard lessons they've learned, and bold predictions that they have for the next 5 to 10 years in autonomous systems and advanced manufacturing. Enjoying the show so far? Then be sure you like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now, back to the show.
Do you think that that's one of the things a lot of companies in this space really miss? They don't understand that there's a couple of ways, quote unquote, to cross the valley of death, and that, lobbying and appropriations are a pretty easy tool they could be using.
Well, let me just address the valley of death comment. I would say that 6 years ago, when people were talking about the valley of death and people were talking about dual use, it had a different meaning than it does today. Today, when people are talking about, they're talking about you need a commercial market because the government sales timelines are really long. And back then, it was equally about the fact that there was no capital availability for the space. So even if you could get early stage capital, there was no growth capital that exists to build and scale. So you needed to have a commercial case to make to be able to get any additional venture funding. And so a couple things have happened since then. The government has gotten better at getting capital out quickly to companies. And again, as much as we want to complain, the government has changed really quickly in the course of 5 years, which is light speed for the government, into the amount of programs, resources, capabilities they have to fund early stage companies, to get them into prototyping, to get them from prototyping into production. And so, it is, I think in my mind, less about the need for commercial compatibility.
Sure.
And mostly about understanding that if you're going to build for defense, just knowing the rules of the road for the market that you're going after. And that includes lobbying. And so now, certainly when we make investments very early in that company's life cycle, prior to Series A, we're talking about them being on the Hill, finding advocacy, and then really starting to think hard about expansion to having someone, in the DC area that can advocate for them. And whether that means bringing on a single operator lobbyist, right, at a low cost, or starting to think about engagement with larger lobbying firms, which those relationships must be managed. Otherwise, I think you end up getting a lot of, expensive trips to Washington, D.C. for some handshaking and not a lot more. Yep. But, it is part of the equation that you have to be prepared to, start to get into.
Yeah, that's good. So why did you decide to invest in Firestorm?
Well, one, I knew you, and I knew your capacity to build, almost in the face of people not thinking the space was a good space for you to build in back when you did it. So you had a track record of success. I met Ian, your co-founder, on the technical side, who, really blew me away in the way that he thought about additive manufacturing as part of the business, when at a time additive manufacturing had mostly been used for hobby, applications. But I think, that notion that, sure, say that additive is for single use. Well, guess what? These are going to be single use items. I think that made a lot of sense to me. And then your third co-founder, Chad, who I knew by reputation. All special operations guys have a network of folks out there ready to do the good guy check. And Chad not only passed that with flying colors, but, huge admiration for him and his time in uniform.
He saved Captain Phillips.
And so the team really told most of the story for me. And I remember very vividly in the pitch you had made, and we were going through the slides, and you told me, we got to a slide where you kind of sheepishly said, well, and there's a commercial use case for this. We could deliver blood in Africa with our drones. And I said, if you're going to make a weapon system, don't tell me how it's going to deliver lunch. Just be awesome at building the best weapon system possible.
What's interesting is because I had the scars from, we'll call it Defense Tech 1, right? So counter UAS phase 1 with Citadel, that was what I was supposed to talk about. And you did an incredible job of just telling me, tell the story, sell it, and explain why it's needed now. We don't need to go, down a rabbit hole on the dual use, quote unquote, side of things.
And even as you were starting, I would say that defense tech investors were still very sheepish about anything that had lethal applications. And so I think the timing was right when we met that, you were building a product that had a urgent need, and you were speaking to someone who had already been on the pointy end of the stick before and probably had less reservations about kinetic applications.
Right. I mean, you are an OG in this space for that reason, right? And it's probably interesting now to watch a ton of people come in and have to explain to them how defense tech works, because it is very kind of formulaic, if you will, especially on the investor side of things.
I mean, I'd say that I've welcomed the participation of a more diverse set of people that want to invest in this space. I mean, you want people to want to touch this space.
You absolutely do.
We're small. I need people that can follow on. I need people with growth capital. And so you need that appetite. And so this really is a space where, you have to be collaborative.
Yeah.
You want other people to win because you want to win with them.
What do they say? Rising tide lifts all boats. Yeah, it's great. All right. So Tommy, if people want to follow you on social media or learn more about you, where can they find you?
They can join the tens of followers that I have on Twitter.
Dozens of followers. So just type in Tommy Hendrix and he looks like a pirate. That's his avatar.
Yeah.
And then you can also find you on LinkedIn, right?
I'm on LinkedIn.
Cool. Tommy Hendrix and Managing Director of Decisive Point.
Sure.
Great. Thanks for your time today, bro.
Thanks for listening to the Drone Wars podcast. Each week, we bring you fascinating conversations with leaders shaping the future of air, sea, land, and space technologies. Catch new episodes every Tuesday wherever podcasts can be found. Until then, we'll see you next time.